Well, hello. Welcome to another clinical case vignette with Dr. Childress here. Today I'm going to be discussing another family in the narcissistic dad pattern with the targeted mom. This is a Johnson family. They have two children, two adolescent children, a male 15-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter. So in this pattern, we have the narcissistic dad pattern with the son. And this is going to be the most highly spousal abuse feel to the various patterns here. And in this particular family, the father has remarried. So we're about 3 years in. We're going into the middle phase of things. And the father has remarried, and the new stepmother is aligned with the father and the children against the mother. So, regarding the Johnson family here, as I said, we have a lied father and a targeted mother, two children, son 15, daughter 13, entering mid-development of the pathology about 3 years post-separation with a new stepmother with the father. Now, here's the genogram for this family, and you can see with the genogram, we have a new complication of the stepmother who's branching off of the father's family. And then we have the two children, Mary and Jason, with the family. Now, what would happen in terms of your thinking about the family if instead of Jason and Mary, this was Juan Carlos and Maria? Okay, all of a sudden we're into different expectations or different perceptions or something, because we have cultural factors involved. And the truth is, we always have cultural factors. Even if the two parents are from the same general culture, white Northern European or Korean or something, there's still differences in the culture of the two families within that overall culture. So there's always cultural issues involved with all families. Plus, there's just family heritage and family lineage and oftentimes extended family issues involved in this situation. So while on these videos I'm not addressing the cultural issues necessarily, they will always be present and we need to address them. We need to interpret the family within a cultural context. In addition, we need to be very, very careful about judging parenting relative to different cultural values, personal values, religious values. So really with clinical psychology, we're focused on child abuse, not which parent deserves to be a parent based on some arbitrary criteria. So with the cultural factors, for example, both of these children are bicultural. They have their mother's cultural and heritage and family lineage background, and they have their fathers, and they blend both of those within themselves. And for a child to reject either parent, like in this family, they'll lose half of their identity. So it's just evacuating half of who they are to lose a parent. So this is not an acceptable solution to anything. We never leave a breached attachment bond unrepaired. Now, what's happening in this family is called sealing over. That's the term for it. So after the divorce, now the mother is kind of inconvenient. The dad would like to go off and start with a new stepmother, and she wants to, join with the father. And so she's taken on the two children as the surrogate mother role. And this mother is just hanging around and inconvenient, so she needs to go away. With this particular pattern, as I'm looking at this, that would be very strong that mother needs to go away or the father needs to go away with the remarriage. Over in the borderline pattern or with younger children. With the older children, there's a very manipulative feel to it. The stepmother is bonding into the father, using the children and her relationship with the children. But the dynamic isn't is quite as enmeshed as it would be over with the borderline mom situation. But so the father here in this particular pattern with the narcissistic father, let me talk about that for a second. The narcissistic dark triad and dark tetrad personality is kind of empty inside. They're empty of love, absence of empathy, classic presentation, classic symptom of a narcissistic spectrum personality. And so they're, because of that emptiness, they're very charming. I mean, I even got the sociopath qualities of the dark triad and dark tetrad. So they're very charming people, and they're kind of expansive, and everybody likes to be around them. But when it actually comes to intimacy, there's no there. Um, and so typically in this pattern, the mother and father got together and married, and the mother was taken in, seduced by his charms. And then she kind of hoped that as they would develop, the intimacy would come. But what she discovered is that no, there's no intimacy, that he's kind of cruel, and she begins to see some of the dark side of him in the marriage, and then eventually divorces him because it's problematic living with a narcissist. So what's happening here is that dad, in a lot of these patterns, doesn't much care about the alienation or their children's rejection of their mother. I mean, he's enjoying it, he's using it, he's manipulating it, but most of it's being driven by the stepmother, who is using her new role as the wonderful parent and mother to the children, and she's getting the children to bond into her as the all wonderful, all understanding stepmother with the evil bad mother in order to bond with the dad. So it's us against the evil mother, and I'm the wonderful parent for your children, and that's her way of accessing this emotionally empty father and strengthening their bond. And so that's where the motivation from the stepmother in here is, using his children to facilitate her bond into the parent within this role of the all wonderful, all understanding stepmother, as compared to the narrative of the mother being this evil, angry, hostile, not understanding parent. So that's where the stepmother is driving a lot of the process oftentimes with this, where she's strengthening the bond as the new mother. And you're going to see, this is the pattern, narcissistic dad with a new stepmother, that you will see the parental replacement. That's ACS4. Now, of those associated clinical signs, and I have them described elsewhere, ACS, they're not diagnostic, okay? They're just frequently present, but not always present. Now, with ACS 3 and 4, that's the exclusion demand. The child doesn't want the parent coming to their music recitals or soccer games or graduations or those sorts of things. You're excluding you from the life. That's pretty much diagnostic, because that only exists in this type of pathology. Children adore having their parents come and watch them play soccer, and they love attention from their grandparents, from strangers, from everybody. They like being watched, and they like being, performing for other people and for performing for families. So for a child to say, I don't want my parent at my soccer game or my baseball game, that's a very odd symptom. We never see that symptom anywhere else except over here. And what it is that the allied parent gets disorganized when the other parent shows up, and the child's a regulatory object for that parent, so that starts to stress them out and everything. So there's reasons for ACS3, but it's only pretty much shows up with this pathology. ACS4, also the parental replacement, only shows up with this pathology, where and that's where the children will start calling their mom by her first name, Nancy, and so instead of being my mom, she's Nancy. And so that de-ownership of their parent by calling them their first name instead of mom or dad is an indicator of parental replacement. And then, or in this case, calling the stepmother mom or dad. That's not mom or dad. That's, that should be, Sally or whoever. That should be the first name basis with your stepmother. And so things get messed up. And that's pretty much diagnostic as well. If you see parental replacement, either calling the parent by the first name or calling the step parent mom or dad, we're talking about this type of pathology. And the reason for that is the nature of the attachment system. The attachment system is very specific on who it bonds to because it comes from, predators. And out in the savannah, and you got a little human community, and you got lions and hyenas around you. Now, when that predator charges into the human community and gets everybody running, that child needs to run to a specific person. If they run to any old person, they may or may not get protection from these strangers within the community. They need to run to my mother and my father. It's very possessive. That person, that parent belongs to me, and I belong to that parent. And so there's an ownership quality to that bond. And so when we see a child rejecting that ownership, that's not consistent with how an authentic attachment system. That's always my mother. That's always my father. It's so strong that children can be adopted. And when they find out they're adopted, they want to find their birth parent because that's my mother or my father. And so it's a very distinctive quality, that ownership. So ACS4, when we see that, it's very kind of diagnostic. But put the whole pattern together, see the whole puzzle, see everything sitting there. But that's a consistent thing we see. Now, in addition, off of this pattern, we will have the father-son are on the values and identity bond. Now, that's going to be really problematic because the values that the dad's going to teach his son are narcissistic values. And what he's going to teach his son is it's okay to be cruel to his mother because she deserves it. Okay, and that's your classic spousal abuse theme. Yeah, of course I hit her. She deserved it. My dinner was cold. She deserved to suffer. And it's that narcissistic value that people deserve to suffer. And then they go around and decide who failed, who's inadequate, and then they can be cruel to that person. And they say they deserve it because they were stupid. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. That's your narcissistic value. The actual healthy value is that we're not nice to other people because of who they are. We're nice because of who we are. And so that's what we need to teach Jason and Mary relative to their mother. Is they're going to say, well, mom deserves it because she did this and she was this and she's inadequate and all these things. And we're going to have to correct them and say, wait. We're not nice to your mother because of who she is. You're nice because of who you are. So I want you to start to show your value system, show who you are, show you're a good person. Now, mother isn't actually inadequate. She's not actually a problem. That's an inverted hierarchy where they're being empowered by their father to judge the mother as if she was a child and they were the parent. And so that's all the features of the cross-generational coalition. At the same time, we don't like to see cruelty as a symptom feature of children. And so we need to readjust the values, especially that the son is receiving from the same gender identity bond from his father. He's learning essentially spousal abuse value systems. And then that's problematic for Mary, who's following underneath that, because she's in a spousal abuse family and she's on the same gender bonds with her mother. And so we need to clarify values within the family for her as well. The other feature that we will see with this, as I've said, we're in the dark triad, dark tetrad pattern here. The other vulnerable dark triad, the borderline spectrum, doesn't have quite as much of the spousal abuse feel to it. The borderline feel has more false allegations and higher anxiety. This one, though, the dark triad, narcissistic, psychopathic, Machiavellian levels of manipulation, and then for the tetrad, you add sadism to that. The concerns for spousal abuse are really high, and on this particular pattern, this is the most concerning because we have the male father with the male son, and he's teaching his son it's okay to be cruel to his mother. Essentially, he's weaponizing his son and using the son to beat up the mother. And meanwhile, the son's getting all black and blue and bruised, on his soul from being used as a weapon against his high affection mother. Now, that mother-son bond's a high affection bond. We want lots of love coming into that son. We want him to feel loved by his mother. And instead, it's all twisted up where he's a weapon of almost violence, emotional, psychological violence against his mother. And so these are the situations or the families where one of the symptom features is the mother calling the police because the son is threatening her somehow. And it shows up in this particular adolescent male period. It can show up with the lead daughter, too. The lead daughter can be sufficiently weaponized as a spousal abuse weapon that the mother calls the police on the daughter. But typically, it's more the police are getting called on the son because he's doing something threatening, because he provoked an argument. Mom takes the phone away, and now they're getting into something, and she feels in danger. Oftentimes with the advice of the therapist or somebody in authority around who says, call the police. If he's threatening you, that's what you should do. She calls the police. And then he forever holds that against her. How dare you call the police? And that's going to become the unforgivable event. And the dad will say, she's a bad mom. She called the police on him. Oh, he's a good son and all these sorts of things. But he was threatening her. So if you do an applied behavioral analysis, you go, holy cow, that you don't threaten your mother with violence. Okay, so no, we should, normal range families, you do not have the parents calling the police on their children. Okay, that never happens in a normal family. So we have some serious, serious problems. If we have that going on, if we have a mother feeling threatened for her safety from her son or from her daughter, but this cruelty and using the son as a spousal abuse weapon is going to be really high in this variant. In addition, over with the mom, you're going to get a really strong grief response. Now, you get this with the targeted dads as well, but the mother is that's her babies. There's a difference in perception relative to the mother regarding her children. And so you take her children away and replace her with a new mother, her grief is going to be off the charts. And so we have to address that. And that's a little bit where we get into the cruelty of the children and say, holy cow, don't be so cruel to your mother. Okay, this is your mother. Be nice, be, happy Mother's Day and affection. It doesn't take that much from you to be nice to your mom. Okay, but she deserves it because she, didn't cook my special dinner or something. And so that cruelty is very disturbing and causing that. And the children are going to feel guilty about that because there's loyalties in the family. And so you're loyal to your mom, you're loyal to your dad, you're loyal to your clan, your family. And when they breach loyalty like that with their mom, they feel really guilty. And you got a son, a high affection bond, and now he's betrayed his mother and joined with his father and stuff. That's creates all sorts of underlying issues. So we have to fix these relationships. Get these kids a normal range, at least, 15, 13. They got a little bit of time left here. Let's get them that normal range childhood or normal range adolescence to prepare them for launching into adulthood. Let's not squander the last few years and leave them all chaotic, and then we just toss them out into adult life with all these damaged relationship bonds. The other feature with this, I want to point out, is the mother's shame. And this was pointed out to me by her mom one time when she said that the reactions of moms versus dads are a little bit different. Because if you go out to your friends, your work colleagues or something, they say, "Oh, you got many kids?" And, "Yeah, I got 2 kids." And, "Oh, when's the last, when do you see them or something?" We're divorced. And they say, "I haven't seen them in 2 years." Okay. Now, if a dad says that, that's sort of within culture. Okay, you got a divorce and I haven't seen my kids. Okay, so dad kind of moved off and we got a single mom. It's not the best situation, but it's within the scope of kind of normal range cultural things. But when a mother says, "I haven't seen my kids in 2 years," it's like, wow, why not? Wow, you must be a really bad mother if if your own children don't want to be with you. That's the shame. Okay, you must be a really bad mother if your own children, and that's the spousal abuse weapon that the dad is doing with the kids, and the sadism, the sadistic kind of thing. How dare you, reject me? You'll be sorry. I'm going to take your kids away, and they're going to reject you, and that whole shame thing. And this, I talk about this being a ripple of sex abuse. So it's not sex abuse now, it's came into the family somewhere before. And so we see the various themes, but they get spread out. And each generation, they get spread out more and more. So I can kind of tell where it came in by looking at how organized those sex abuse themes are. It's pretty close. Or how diffuse they start to become. And I can kind of estimate where the sex abuse entered the family. Now, with this, the shame is to that child who was sexually abused. Sex abuse and shame are just that's part of the pathology, major part. Now, with the generational transmission, that shame that's with the father and potentially with the father's mother, and that's coming through that family line, gets taken out and projected over to the mother. She's the rejected one. She's the holder of the shame. And so we have to realign that. And what we need is the protector. Okay, the one who protects from the abuse, this child abuse and the spousal abuse. Now that should be the forensic psychologists. Psychologists working in the family courts are the ones who should be protecting the child and the mother, but they're what's called the betrayer role. It's a bystander role, and that's the role of the person who should protect and doesn't. And classically, that's the mother in sex abuse who sacrifices a child to the father or stepdad to maintain her marriage. The one who should protect and doesn't. And so that's the proper situation. The shame, where we should put the shame, if we're looking to locate it anywhere, is over with the forensic psychologists. They should be ashamed of themselves for not protecting this family and for being ignorant and incompetent. That's where the shame should wind up, not on the parent. So that's a feature of the situation. In addition, when you get this pattern or all these patterns, you can potentially have extended family. And so when the breach happens with the mother, it also happens to all the extended family. And so you have grandparent issues now, and aunts and uncles, and a whole family lineage is also being cut off from, because the dad's taking the child and starting a new family, and you guys can just all go away. And that's devastating to the children's sense of continuity across time, across cultures, across just their heritage. So the presenting problem with this family is that following the divorce, the court ordered shared 50-50 custody with the children, and the mother and son started having frequent arguments. And in one incident, the son threatened his mother, and she called the police. So there we have that unforgivable event that the son now uses to justify all current and future rejection. And then 6 months ago, the daughter also began refusing custody time with the mother. And the father says he can't force the children to go on visitations with the mother. So the moment the dad says, I can't force the children to go on visitations, that's an abdication of parental responsibility. Okay. You can't get your children to follow a court order. Well, then you're an incompetent parent. I mean, you need to switch these kids over to the mother because you're teaching them they shouldn't follow court orders, and you're incompetent. You can't get them to over to their mothers, and it's a manipulative thing. Of course, he can get the children. One of the ways I address this sometimes with this dad is I started by saying, so you're a wonderful dad. Yeah, all the kids listen to you. What type when they act up, what do you do? Oh, they never act up with me. They never act. When they do, what do you do? Oh, I just talk to them. So you've got a really, really good relationship with the kids. Yeah, absolutely. So I get him into that expansive, where he's the all wonderful dad part, and I really pull it out. And then I flip it and say, so then you have a lot of influence with your children. Let's use it to get them over to see their mom and have a good relationship with their mom. Oh, I can't do that. Now the children don't listen to me at all. I tell them to go over, but they just don't listen to me. Selective incompetence. Okay. When it comes to bonding to the mother, he's entirely incompetent. In every other way, he's just a wonderful dad. And so that's that manipulative thing that you can draw. And it's what this involves is being able to diagnose the cross-generational coalition. So you get into family systems, you learn what that looks like, you learn about the inverted hierarchy, you learn what the symptom features are of that cross-generational coalition. It will always be denied. You say, oh, you and your son are in a coalition. No, we're not. The mother actually deserves, the punishment. And I totally understand what the son's doing because she was just like that with me as a spouse kind of thing. So they will deny the coalition. But that's one of the features. There's something that says you guys are in a coalition. And then when you bring it up to them, they say, no, that's a symptom feature of that. So then we have, so the assessment, what we would want to do first off, and do this all the time. The children are rejecting a parent. I'm worried about the mom's parenting. Is she doing something? So let's document what she's doing. For clarity, this is a disorganized attachment. And the manipulative parent, the dark parent, is going to find all the ways to manipulate the lack of clarity. So with a highly manipulative parent, and these parents are the best, the dark parents, dark triad, dark tetrad, vulnerable dark triad, are the best manipulators on the planet. And so we really need to get clarity with this situation. So you start by documenting where the mom is. You talk with the dad, you talk with the children, you talk with mom, and you figure out, in applied behavioral analysis, looking how she handles this, you figure out whether she's clearly abusive, CPS level, that's level 1, really severely problematic, but maybe not CPS, Child Protective Services level, but she's really a problem. That would be level 2. She's a normal range parent, but maybe we move her away from discipline over to guidance or something, or help her with a little something. But she's a normal range parent. That's level 3, normal range. But there's a few things we might want to adjust. And then level 4, that's just a normal range and healthy mom. So we want to document that and discuss it with the kids and say, you know what I'm looking at your mom's normal range, and even what you're complaining about is within the scope of normal range, and then help them readjust their persecutory beliefs that are being instilled in them by the dad. Then we'll want to do applied behavioral analysis with behavior chain interview. Certainly I'd want to do it about whatever event caused the police to come. So I'm going to start. And with an applied behavioral analysis like that, you start before the event. So we had the mother calling the police. You don't start with her calling the police. You start with before anything was going on. Where were you, Mom? Where were you, Jason? Okay, so you're playing your video games and you're in the kitchen, tidying up or something. And so then what happened? So mom, you came into the living room and you want to get out to go shopping, so you tell him to turn off the video games. Okay. And is that what happened? She turned it, and then you check with Jason, and you check back with mom, and you check with Jason, and you walk them step by step, starting with before the event, during the event, after the event. And what you're looking is for the cues that are going back and forth that get this escalating, a little bit on the reinforcers, a little bit on the function of the behavior. So you're getting the stepwise, the behavior chain regarding this, before, during, and after. And with each person, you're talking about what were you thinking, what were you feeling, and then what did you do? So thinking, feeling, doing, before, during, and after, back and forth. You just walk it through. And you have a little chart and you're keeping notes. And that's your applied behavioral analysis to look at, is the mother doing something? Is she just going off and screaming? And that's what the children will present. They'll present that she's irrational. She's just going off and screaming for no reason whatsoever. Oh my God. And then when you find out about it, no, the kids were like calling her names or provoking her or refusing. She tells us, pick up your stuff and take it to your room. And they say, shut up. And like, no, she's being provoked by them into anger. And then they hold her to account for that. And so that's where the applied behavioral analysis, just don't take, oh, she's too angry. Well, let's find out specifically what that entails. Are you provoking her? What's going on? So that's the applied behavioral analysis. Now, for all court-involved clinical assessments for attachment pathology, those are all a risk assessment for child abuse to a differential diagnosis for each parent. So either mom's doing something that's abusive, causing the kids to want to flee her, or dad is creating a false or factitious attachment pathology, a persecutory delusion. The kids believe they're being malevolently treated in some way by the normal range parenting of the mom. And so it's a dad who's psychologically abusing the child, or is the mother doing something that's abusive, causing these kids to flee? But either way, we're looking at possible child abuse, and we need to do a risk assessment. So a court-involved risk assessment for child abuse, that needs to be conducted within 6 to 8 weeks. I'd prefer 4 to 6 weeks, but 6 to 8, that is within the realm of tolerable for child abuse. But these 6 to 9 month forensic evaluations, no, that's way, way too long. We need to get on this. We need to get an accurate diagnosis, and we need to fix it. So the other feature that's important with all these families is that we avoid getting into judging cultural differences or personal values or religious values or anything like that. That in the absence of child abuse, parents have the right to parent according to their cultural values, their personal values, and their religious values. And in the absence of child abuse, each parent should have as much time and involvement with the child as possible. In the absence of child abuse, to restrict either parent's time or involvement with the child would damage the child's attachment bond to that parent, thereby harming the child and harming that parent. So what clinical psychology is focused on and what we're worried about is child abuse. If it's not child abuse, then it's within the scope of normal range parenting rights and cultures and things. We'll put it on a treatment plan if we're worried about something, and we'll get agreements and we'll fix things that we agree to fix. But if we have, let's say, somebody, an Indian culture, okay, from India, and so the men and the women kind of are more into roles, okay, traditional roles within that kind of thing. Now, when they're over in the United States, the women's role may be more expansive than it would be potentially back in India. The man's role, he's more kind of the authority here, but that's not kind of the American Western European culture doesn't look in that male as that role. The psychologist involved needs to be very, very careful not to impose their Western or American Western European cultural values on Asian cultures, you know, Arab cultures, uh, Hispanic cultures, different cultures that might have different roles, different value systems. So consultation, if you're working with, I've worked with Armenian families, very distinctive Armenian families. Filipino families, I find Filipino families very distinctive in how they work and how their cultural attitudes and value systems work. And so, if you're working with a culture that you're not otherwise familiar with, getting that consultation from somebody who is a mental health professional who is, or actually lining them up with somebody who understands that culture. So for an Armenian family, I might get them into an Armenian therapist within that community if that's available. The pathology is the same. Narcissistic borderline dark personality who's creating a persecutory delusion and factitious disorder as a weapon of spousal abuse and things. That pathology is the same across cultures. But without that pathology, if it's just parenting and conflicts or things going on, then we need to address those within a cultural lens. The other thing for this family, I'm going to recommend the power of discord, that we always fix things, and it's the breach and repair. So we need to teach both of these children, Jason and his sister Mary, we need to teach both of them how to repair. There's going to be a breach. That's normal. That's called an empathic failure, creates a breach. Then we fix it. Then we breach, then we fix it. Then we breach, then we fix it. That's the breach and repair sequence. So the therapist needs to know how to do that, what that breach and repair sequence is, and that's Tronic and Gold here. And so that we can teach the children how to do it. So that when they get married or have a partner and they have a problem with that partner, they just don't flee and say, okay, that's it, it's all over. No, they have the skill set to fix it because they've learned that in childhood from all the conflicts and fixing it. So that's why we don't leave a breach attachment bond unrepaired. That's the worst thing we can do, is just leave it like that. That's going to cause all sorts of damage. We always want to repair. And it's not, the damage to people doesn't come in the breach. Okay, we can get very explosive breaches from some of these cultures, Southern Mediterranean cultures, Greek or, Italian, can be very flamboyant in their emotional expression. And so we get these flamboyant breaches, but they fix them. And so that there's love, there's support, there's family. Oh my God, we love the family, but we can fight, but we fix them. And that's the critical element, is the damage happens if we don't fix. If we fix, then the damage kind of moves away. It's easier to fix smaller scale arguments than big ones. And so that's why we like to keep them small, but the breach part's small, but that's not the important part. So then I also have a series of video on assessing parenting, so I'm not going to cover that here, but we'd want to assess the parenting with the mother. What type of strategies does she use? Are they effective? Are they not effective? And ultimately, we're going to switch her over from discipline-based strategies to guidance-based strategies. And there's two approaches like that. Discipline-based strategies use punishment and to achieve obedience. Guidance-based strategies use negotiation to achieve cooperation. And that's what we want. We want the child's cooperation. And so while discipline practices work, put them on a timeout, take their stuff away if they don't listen to you and stuff. And that's how a lot of us were raised, on discipline strategies and things. So we replicate those with our children. They're not actually all that necessary or useful. And we prefer parents move over to guidance-based strategies. And that's, you approach with an intent to understand, and you scaffold the child's overcoming whatever challenge they have. That their behavior, the child's behavior, is called a protest behavior. And then we come over, understand what challenge they're having trouble with, and then we help them meet that challenge, and the protest behavior goes away. So that's it could be frustration tolerance. You say no, and now they have frustration, they're managing frustration, they can't do it. Well, we come in and help them manage their frustration. So what's going on with that? So that would be the therapy, is shift over to the guidance space. Because if the mom takes the son's phone away, or he's going to provoke her, he's going to take, and then she's going to do something, discipline, you can't talk to me that way. And then he's going to use that, you don't understand, and she's the bad mom. So that's going to be manipulated. So we have to shift her over. Like the wonderful dad bullet point, we're going to have a wonderful mom bullet point. We're going to make her just great. And we also want with the son, he's on the high affection bond. We want a lot of love getting into that high affection cross-gender bond, mother-son. And so we want to take away all the stuff that interferes with that. So we're going to make her kind of a permissive mom, and if we need rules or structure, let dad do it. Okay. But at 15 and 13, these kids are basically adults. They're basically grown. And so we don't need to give them that child guidance that we would for a younger child. And so we really want to shift over to the guidance-based strategies in adolescence. So here's what the family looks like. And so you can see the genogram here, how it's used. So the father has created this separate little family with the new stepmom. And we have a split representation for the dad. So she's now, the stepmom is in the role of the good mommy, while the children's mother is in the role of the bad mommy. And that's within his structures, and everybody's acting out the scenario, the reenactment narrative. And now, in addition to this, we have the stepmother here in that good mommy role, who's driving a lot of the rejection. So when the children come back and they say, how are things at your mom's or something, they say, oh, she was like demanding, and she, did controlling and mean, and the stepmom will come over and be very nurturing. Oh, you poor dears, you poor thing. Oh, and so she'll fall into that good mommy role. And they say, oh, you're so wonderful. And the dad will say, yeah, isn't she wonderful? And everybody's wonderful over here. And so they get this narrative going. They get a criticism of the mother, and then they elicit that, and then everybody joins about how awful the mother is, and oh, you poor children, which feeds that persecutory delusion. And here's a definition of persecutory delusion from the American Psychiatric Association. That persecutory type, delusions that the person or someone to whom the person is close is being malevolently treated in some way. So the mom's normal range, but these dad and stepmom are communicating to the children and have the belief that the children are being malevolently treated in some way by the normal range parenting of the mother. And they create this false belief that they are being malevolently treated by the mother and the children. There's your persecutory delusion that then destroys their attachment bond to the mother. That's the factitious disorder imposed on the children for secondary gain. In this case, secondary gain to the father and secondary gain to the stepmother for producing false pathology in the children. So with this particular pathology, we're going to be looking at the dark triad, dark tetrad. So the spousal abuse concerns pop up immediately. We have the bad mommy, and in this case, we have a good mommy. So we have both sides of that split representation. We're going to see parental replacement. This is the pattern where you see calling the dad, or calling the mom by her first name, or calling stepmom as mom. You're going to have an emotionally empty father, avoidant attachment. And so the stepmother will be driving the children's rejection in order to stabilize her role and bond with the father. And so as if she's a wonderful mother, then we're all us against mom, and she can provide this nurturing role, then that brings her closer to this emotionally absent father. And so you're going to get an all wonderful fathers presentation. And you're also going to see the mother being idealized as, or the stepmother as being idealized as all wonderful as well and all understanding. And the theme that the father will put out there, you can listen for this one, is that the children don't need their mother because they have this wonderful new stepmother. So we can let the mother go. She's not necessary to the children, which totally misunderstands how the attachment system works. That's their mother. Mothers are not replaceable. Fathers are not replaceable. And so that idea that you can replace the mother with a stepmother, classic narcissistic superficial relationship. People are replaceable. You know, if they annoy you, you just replace them and move them out. So mom's annoying, so we get a new stepmother in. Okay. And so that shows up, this idea that it's okay for the children because they have this new stepmother, and so they don't really need their mother. You'll also see the inverted hierarchy. The children will be judging the adequacy of their mother. And again, the spousal, emotional, and psychological abuse of the mother, you'll want to attend to that. Splitting. I want to bring up splitting because there's two features of splitting, two aspects that people may not understand. One is the polarization, all good, all bad, and it flips back and forth, and there's no middle, extremes with no middle. The other feature, though, is a cognitive rigidity. The things once defined don't change. And so you say, what if I fix your mom and make her a wonderful mom? They say, oh, no, you'll never do that. She's fake. You'll also hear the fake. She's lying. She's fake. You know, it's all, she puts on this show for other people, but it's not real and stuff. And so things once defined do not change. And that's a feature. So Linehan talks about that, Marshall Linehan. So they tend to see reality in polarized categories of either or rather than all, and within a very fixed frame of reference. For example, it's not uncommon for such individuals to believe that the smallest fault makes it impossible for that person to be good inside. And so you'll see that in the judgment of the mother and the inverted hierarchy. Their rigid cognitive style further limits their abilities to entertain ideas of future change and transition, resulting in feelings of being in an interminable, painful situation. Things once defined do not change. Once a person is flawed, for instance, that person will remain flawed forever. Okay, so that you'll run into this cognitive rigidity with the children. That no, we can't fix mom. Mom's awful. Mom's terrible. And any affection that the mother expresses, they will discount with, you know, the ACS of, oh, she's a liar. She's just a liar. That's fake. You know, she presents that way to other people, but, you know, it's all fake because they have to deny the authenticity of that love. Otherwise, it's too painful for them. So then for the diagnosis, we want the parenting practices rating scale on the mother, document where her parenting is 1, 2, 3, or 4. We want to rule out abusive parenting. Want to look at the delusional thought disorder, mental status exam of thought and perception, looking at do the children have a fixed and false belief maintained despite contrary evidence that they are being malevolently treated in some way by the mom's normal range parenting. We want to take a look at the response to intervention for the factitious disorder. Make mom wonderful, change who she is, change how she responds. We should see a change in the response of the children. They should bond into her if we remove the barriers. If they're seeking to flee the mother and she's a normal, that's a factitious disorder. So then we're worried about the child psychological abuse and of the spousal abuse. So we got 2 abuse diagnoses, and so our duty to protect is active. With any abuse pathology, when we return a child abuse diagnosis here, it's a safety plan. We don't go into a treatment plan. We first make sure everybody's safe. And so this would be a protective separation. Now, We need this protective separation because we're going to be asking these children to rebond into their mother. If we leave them over with their dad and stepmother, who are motivated to create the pathology in the children, and it's going to be all these manipulative pressures, psychological pressures on the children to maintain their rejection, loyalty bonds and stuff, and we're trying to restore, we're just going to rip these children apart between our efforts to create a healthy attachment bond to their mother and the pathological parents' desire to keep the kids symptomatic. So we're going to need a period of time when we don't have that distorting influence from the pathological, narcissistic, dark parent. And we have to understand that this is a pathological parent, a very problematic parent. Even though they present well or whatever, that's where our assessment comes in, and we understand who this is. So we need to protect the children from that negative influence so that we can give them a single directive, which is bond into your mother. It's going to be okay. She loves you, and we're working with it, and we'll fix the relationship. Once we get that bonding, then we restore back with dad, and we keep the kids stable. So we don't try to fix them while in the mess. We pull them out, fix them, and then reestablish and keep them stable. So then once we get that protective separation, and in this, during this period, for a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old in this situation, I'm going to raise that I'm hearing the spousal abuse themes, which is, yeah, she deserves to suffer. And I want to point that up to the son to readjust him and say, I don't want you spousally abusing your mom. Okay, that's not the way we treat women. That's not the way we treat your mother. That's not the way we treat people. And so that's a really problematic value. And it's your father. I'm attributing that to your father's influence. So I want you to show me an appropriate value system that who you are. You're nice because of who you are, not because of who the other person is. So I want to see that from you, Jason. And then the other feature is I want to highlight that theme as well for Mary, because she's in a family, and if this is a spousal abuse theme, and she needs to understand kind of what the dynamics are. You do not treat your mother that way, and as a wife, you shouldn't be treated that way, and a woman, and all these sorts of things. So we need to clarify the spousal abuse themes and get the children not to participate in those. Then we'll toss on the treatment. We'll toss on a contingent visitation schedule. I'm still going to be attending to the spousal abuse themes, especially with a son and father. That's going to be the highest one. So I'm going to be attending to those, and I'm going to want the children to show appropriate social values relative to the mother. Now, the contingent visitation schedule, all right, use that and recommend that a lot as we restore with the parent for a variety of reasons. But if you didn't use that, what would you do? Well, we would have the protective separation. You'd restore with dad and the stepmom. If they produce the pathology again in the child and the ratings go down to 1s and 2s, we always have outcome measures. So the ratings go down to 1s and 2s and stay there, then that's an indication the child abuse is resumed, and it's in an Excel file. We take it into the court. We say, Your Honor, look, when the moment we restore with dad, the kids drop back again. He's doing it again. The court would order another protective separation. We'd fix with the children and restore with dad. And hopefully things stay. But if he produces pathology, we'd have to go back to court, get another protect. And so it would be boom, 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 boom of protecting the children based on their symptoms. So what the contingent visitation schedule, it just kind of allows it to be more efficiently done. 3 days, not 3 months, and based on the symptoms, and more flexibility on the contingent visitation schedule. The other feature to recognize is we have a high affection mother-son bond. So I want that child, I want Jason to feel loved by his mother. That's a critical treatment goal. And so I'm going to have that as a bullet point. I want Jason to feel loved. And maybe I can get a rating from Jason. Jason, every day I want you to send me a rating of 1 to 7 on your mom, how much you feel loved. And then when we get into therapy, I'm going to say, okay, Jason, you rated 1. What can we do about that? Okay, you know what? I want your mom to hug you 3 times a day. And you go, no, no, no. I said, wait a minute. You're saying your mom's too mean, but you don't want love. Well, that's weird. And so I'm going to be focused on getting that increase in love. The other one is Mary, because Mary is going to be, Mary's going to be on the same gender values and identity bond with her. And mom's going to be focused mostly on, or dad's going to be mostly focused on the eldest son as a regulatory object. But Mary's on the high affection bond with her dad. And her dad is like emotionally absent because he's a dark personality. Plus, he's got a stepmother that's replaced Mary. And so Mary's really kind of lost in the situation, and she's not maybe getting a lot of love from her dad, unless she also rejects her mom, so she can get flamboyant in that as well. And so we want to look about the affection from mom to Mary and see if we can increase the bonding within that zone of things. And we don't want her to get lost in the mix relative to things. So we're going to have an outcome measure. All therapy has outcome measures. So we'll want to see if our treatment's having good progress, or if there's a relapse, and we want to give the kids something solid to establish or goals to establish. And every time they come into the therapy session, we're going to talk about the ratings. So we're not going to talk about what happened 2 years ago when mom called the police. No, that's 2 years ago. I can't solve that. We're going to talk about what happened last Tuesday. Okay, and apply behavioral analysis, look at the ratings, give the kids a sense of what's normal parenting, what the expectations for them are, what they're thinking, and in a concrete way to manage the continued visitation schedule. Okay, just stay normal range with your mom, and everything stays normal with your dad, your stepmom. Everything's kind of going great there. So with that, that's the vignette for a narcissistic dad pattern with normal range mom when we get the influence of a stepmother. And now this can also be a stepmother. It could be his own mom can be doing this, and we get the mom kind of doing that, aligning with the children. Now she's the wonderful grandmother, and getting the child away from the mom for those sorts of things. So we have an outside person. The other variant on the step parent is when the targeted parent gets remarried. And so now we have a stepdad or a stepmom in that situation. That's a very difficult role for that person. They're in a very sensitive role. And sometimes they use that, and the child rejects the step parent rather than the actual parent. But I'll talk about that variant in a different vignette. So with that, I'm going to head off to the rest of my day and the rest of my work. And good luck, everybody.